pleasure to introduce Rabbi Sherre Hirsch. She was the first female rabbi.
We're going to do that.
Yes, it's short, of America's largest conservative temple, Sinai Temple, no easy feat. And I'll never forget the first time I saw her. It's reminiscent of the scene when Harry met Sally, and there's a woman at the table who sees Meg Ryan eating a pastrami sandwich and just going on and on. And she says to the waiter, "I'll have what she's having." So that's what I felt when I first heard Sherre. The joy she exuded in the form of a palpable love of God was overwhelming. And she's never lost that loving feeling and has continued to express it through many avenues. Probably her greatest contribution to the Jewish community has been her ability to enable others to feel it too. Her first book, We Plan, God Laughs, 10 Steps to Finding Your Divine Path When Life is Not Turning Out Like You Wanted, struck a chord within me that has made me a much more accepting person. Her second book is Thresholds, How to Thrive Through Life's Transitions, to Live Fearlessly and Regret-Free. A gifted rabbi, author, educator, and spirituality consultant, Sherre became the senior rabbinic scholar for Hillel International. Furthermore, her emphasis on spiritual well-being has made her a much in-demand leader of retreats at some of the top spas in the country. She recognized early on that the future depends on young people's engagement and in their connection to their Jewish roots. So she has even developed an app to help them do this. And if this weren't enough, she's a loving wife and mother of 4 beautiful children.
Check my husband on the loving.
And now wearing her newest hat as Chief Innovation Officer of the American Jewish University, Sherre continues to put a fresh spin on our ancient tradition. She recognizes in a world that's often spinning too fast, new approaches to old traditions might be the best way to engage those who doubt and those who question that which our faith previously never allowed to be questioned or doubted. I'm proud to be able to introduce you.
My real claim to fame is that I'm Rebecca Schatz's bat mitzvah rabbi. She was just appointed Beth Ops associate rabbi, so really that's my claim. And I'll just say one other word is that my husband always said that if he knew what being a spouse of a pulpit rabbi was going to be like, he would have never married me. But if he knew I was going to have a gig at Canyon Ranch and Maribel and the tax benefits, he would have married me 16 times over. So for those of you that are spouses, know when I heard loving, I thought, well, today maybe. But what I want you to do for just a moment, because we have about 40 minutes together, is I'm going to have you put down everything on the ground. And this I learned from Aryeh, who's in Israel. Just put everything on the ground. If you are furled up, unfurl yourself. Your hands are clasped, unclasp them, be in the place of receiving. Untwist your legs, close your eyes from top to bottom, and this is a very sophisticated thing. Put your tushy, it's a very technical word, back in the chair. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Take another deep breath in and exhale. Take one more deep breath in with an audible exhale, release. This time, as you breathe in, ask yourself, what klipot, what obstacles would keep me from being entirely present for the next hour? A lingering conversation with a spouse or a congregant, the emails on your phone, I can remind you of them all. I'll let you come up with them. And once you've identified all those obstacles, begin to slowly release each one with a deep breath. Give yourself the gift of presence, of mind, of body, and of soul. When you're ready, take another deep breath in and exhale. Taking 2 final deep breaths in on your own, and slowly, gently letting go. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So I know many of you in the room, and for those of you that I don't, I want to make sure by the end that I do. So please, if I hadn't had a chance to introduce myself, or you came in just a little bit a moment ago, at the end, stay and introduce yourself, because building community and having deep connections between our colleagues is an invaluable resource. So for those of you that know me, you know that I'm a storyteller. And when I was in grammar school, as all rabbis are storytellers, I used to get in trouble for talking too much, all the time. I even passed notes in the classes, in French, in Hebrew, in the language, and still got in trouble. And I remember I got called to the principals many a times, but one time in particular, she said, you know, with all this talking, with this, like, you're gonna make a career of talking and you're gonna be out of work for your whole life. And I realized, I'm way smarter than that. I became a rabbi, which is that I made a career out of storytelling. So I'm going to start with a story. I was about 1.5 years into the rabbinate at Sinai Temple. I had come with David Wolpe. I had just met my husband. I was single when I came to the rabbinate. And about 1.5 years into it, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at 57 years old, and they said he would die within 6 months, and he did. And then I had to get up at the holidays and be the cheerleader, right? The Jewish cheerleader. And I felt great. All my years of being a cheerleader in high school were really going to serve me, but actually the death of my father was not. And I got flooded with all kinds of questions and all kinds of things. But as you know, far better than I do, because I haven't done high holidays in some years, is that Jews often, month before the holiday, even the day before, like, I didn't get my tickets, they become super high demanding. Beyond high demanding. It's like suddenly they think of you. I can't tell you how many people would call me, like, Erev Rosh Hashanah, and be like, I was just thinking of you. Really? Because I'm not thinking of you right now. Right? So what would happen is suddenly all this immense pressure comes on, and all this 3 days of total, everything is all about you and the rabbi and performance, and yet my life didn't stop. My father had just died. I was newly married. And I went to go seek out a rabbi's counsel. And what he said to me is, you got to put all that to the side and suspend everything you're feeling, because you really got to be there for your flock. And I listened. And I saw other rabbis around the community go through cancer and car accidents and all kinds of things, and they suspended what that happened to them and just served their flock. And that was what I was told to do. Except by the end of the holidays, I was not wiped out. I was like, I don't want to be a Jew anymore. Like, forget this, I want to be a rabbi. Like, I am done. And by the end of all the holidays, I just wanted to stay in bed for 3 days. Because everything that I felt and everything that I had experienced, I had suspended. And I had to postpone. And I actually think that was 20-some years ago, that times are completely changing. And today, what I want to do is I want to look at how we've been trained to suspend our emotions and how that's antithetical for us doing the best job that we can do as rabbis and to truly serve our communities with love, with passion, and with what I will call emotional courage. We're going to study Peter Bregman, we're going to study Laura Gottlieb, and we're going to study the Torah. I always like to mix neuroscience, pop culture, and Torah, because to me, they're all one and the same. So with that, I'm going to ask you to take a look at with me a text you know very well. It's the death of Nadav and Abihu. Just grab one. I'm not going to go through the text in a tight read, only because most of you are familiar with it, because I'm more interested in not what happens with the death of Aaron's sons, but what happens afterwards. So as you know, they were consumed by this fire. Everybody knows the story. I'm not going to go back on it. But what we do know afterward is Aaron Vayidom, right? He was silent. But that's not the interesting part. I'm just waiting for it to come around. Moments after Vayidom, chapter 11, all the concept, like consuming of fire is in 10. In 11, the first line is, I gotta need my glasses, this is, if you took Laura Geller's last session, then you know aging is real. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe ve'el Aharon lemor alehem. So what's the kushia? What's the problem that the text is asking? The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying to them. What's the obvious, maybe out of context? It's the repetition, right? And before this, we know that God spoke to Moses, and then Moses related to Aaron. So why the repetition? God spoke to Moses and Aaron, God spoke to them. Why do we have that? So Ibn Ezra, Spain, northern Spain, 12th century, says, right? Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe el Aharon. Why does it say God spoke to Moses and to Aharon? Bavor shehu hakohen hamoreh hamavdil bein hatameh ubein hatahor. Because Aaron was the Kohen who must teach others how to distinguish between ritually impure and ritually impure. So here's the thing. Right after Aaron's sons died, we know that the community is allowed to mourn. Aaron is not allowed to mourn, but it's even worse than that. Aaron is given a specific tafkid, a specific job that he is in charge of. So it's not, oh my God, Aaron, just hang back and whatever Moses relays to you, you relay to the people. But you're now completely in mourning. I mean, and by the way, this is a tragic death. Now, I'm going to give you more work. By the way, I'm going to give you the high holidays, and 1,900 people are going to come in, and you've got to be even more medactic. You've got to be even more committed to your work, and this time you can't shove it off on Moses, the other guy. It's up to you. And what the text says, so what do we learn from that?
God wrote his face in it.
Tell me your first name again.
Michelle.
Michelle, tell me where you're from. Where you're at.
Children's Hospital.
Children's Hospital. Good, 'cause I did that because I want to something out. Okay. So, Michelle, God wrote his face in it, right? What else? Good. Tell me your name.
It's Lisa.
And you're?
From Ventura.
Ventura, good.
It's exactly this is the sower point. This is exactly where his sons have died in this not knowing how to distinguish between what's ritually pure and impure. So now he needs to teach about this piece. It's almost like holding his own personal shame up in front of the community. They do something that is impure.
Right, it's like, not only are we going to rub your face in it, but on Dafka, the specific issue, you're going to have to get up there and be like, let me talk about it. Let me talk about it. But my sons, they were consumed by fire. They didn't know anything because clearly I didn't teach them well, right? That's exactly good. What else? Is it because I'm calling you your name with your place of work? What else? What do you pull away from it? This is what the Torah teaches us. This is what we're supposed to do. So what do you draw from that?
Well, I don't know if this is
Tell us
where
your
you're
name.
going. I'm Robin from Congregation B'nai Israel in Tustin. His mourning comes on display. I mean, in the process of giving that talk, whatever he's teaching, what if he breaks down? What if he cries and people see him? Like, I've been told at life cycle events and other things, don't cry. It's not okay to cry. Well, I'm sorry. That's just not who I am. I have to cry. And it's as if we can't, rabbis aren't allowed to show our own personal kind of emotions, especially in a public setting, especially high holy
Well,
days.
it's so beautiful that you just said that. It's like the modeling is don't show any of your emotions, don't reveal yourself. You sort of have to buck it up and show everybody that you're strong enough. And yet, we are emotional people, right? We experience like 100 emotions per day, but I actually think it's like 1,000 times that. Go ahead, tell me your name.
Osna.
Oh, it's not. Nice to meet you.
Here in Brentwood.
Great.
So what I take from this is that Aaron is irreplaceable. That's his job. He's the Kohen, and that's what he has to do. He has to rise up. Everything that has happened to him, the job is his. He has to fulfill his job.
Right. So that's the messaging we get. No matter what, rise above, fulfill your job, deny yourself, deny your feelings, and just buck it up. And that's what we've been messaged all along, right? Go ahead.
But isn't there like a little epilogue to this that, Moses gets annoyed with Aaron and Aaron speaks up for himself and Moses is shivering?
That doesn't come till much later. At this moment, the expectation is Aaron is supposed to set aside his feelings, his mourning. He's actually even prohibited from mourning. He's supposed to literally serve the congregation above himself and because of his grief. And the other thing about it, what do we know when we actually set aside our emotions or suspend them or postpone them? What do we know what happens?
They come back even more fierce a little later.
Right. It's like if you put pressure in a bottle. The more you push it down, eventually what happens? You explode. And what do we know also that people do? We do self-destructive things to ourselves, right? We drink, we overeat, we say mean things to people. I mean, this isn't like some secret thing. But the minute you suspend what you're feeling for a suspended period of time, and even if you're doing it for a greater good, what happens is it breaks down our emotional system. Okay? So, what I want to say is that everything we've been taught about rising above, kicking aside our emotions, being the spiritual leader that everybody needs is, or could be, completely wrong. That in fact, the community that we need now is something, what they need from us now is very different than what they needed 50 years ago from their rabbi. And I want to show it through science. So, rather than talking about them, I want to talk about us. So give me 1 second. What's the obvious traumas that rabbis go through during the high holidays because of life? Obvious are, what are those recognizable traumas?
Loss.
Good. So death of a parent, right? Everybody in the community, in your community may be like, oh, my rabbi just lost his father. All may do. Zikrononi bracha, right? May have lost his father, or may have lost, and everybody in the community knows that, and they're sitting there looking at the rabbi and saying, like, they have obvious trauma this year. They've been sick, they lost a parent, they have a sick child, and so there's a level of empathy, kind of, from the congregations, right? From some people. But what's the less, what I would call subtle traumas that rabbis go through during the high holidays and during the year?
What are some what?
What are the subtle traumas?
Well, there's the contract negotiation that didn't go as they wanted, or something happened with the board, or people left the congregation angry, or it could be
Right.
a number of
So-
those little traumas.
Right, all the subtle traumas are stress, right? You're having marital problems at home, your kids just left for college, you just went through a nasty contract negotiation, or you're in the midst of one. My favorite was the night before my son, my first child, had his bris. I got a call from the board, and they said, the head of the board said, we're not sure how the contract negotiations are going to go once you come back from maternity leave. And I hung up, right? Because the truth of the matter is, those are subtle stresses. I'm not going to announce that at high holidays, but come high holidays, that's burning inside me. Do you remember when I was on maternity leave and you called me the night before my son's bris, right? There's also depression, loneliness, all these subtle things that we as human beings experience, but we're not going to shout them from the rooftops. But then I would say there's even a hidden, a much more subversive type of transition or suffering or human experience that we go through during all year, but especially at the high holidays. Which one is that?
Not feeling good enough.
Not feeling good enough. I mean, how many times are the congregants sitting there, and I go to lunch now because I get to be a congregant, and I hear people say, the sermon was good, the sermon was bad, and I always say, stop assessing the sermon and spend more time assessing yourself, right? Because the truth of the matter is, they're sitting there, and we feel we're being assessed. How good is our sermon? And then someone says, oh, did you hear such and such a sermon? His was so much better. Did you? I was listening. I should have gone to such and such a shul. I've literally sat with people when they've said that to other people. And I thought to myself, I'm a rabbi. I can hear you. So there's all these subtle, deep stresses of self-esteem, comparison, that are things that we feel, and they're worse is that they're amplified during the high holidays. We may feel them during the year, but they become highly amplified during the high holidays, and it makes us feel even worse. So here we are, we're supposed to get up, be the cheerleader for our congregation, and yet there is a host of emotions going through us, and many of them that are even hidden or even quieter during the year become more exacerbated. And what have we been modeled through the Bible and through life? Rabbi, buck it up, set those aside. We'll deal with it after the high holidays, and then you'll want to spend 3 days and get a massage and spend 3 days in bed after Simchas Torah, which is not how I want you to run it this year. I want to do it differently because I think your congregants deserve it. I know you deserve it. And I really believe that the world will be better if we do. So I study a lot of neuroscience. And there's a guy named Peter Bregman. He's the CEO of Bregman Partners. His whole work, he writes for Harvard Business Review. He went to Princeton. He's got all those stats behind him, whatever that's worth. Actually, the smartest people I've ever hired are the people that never went to college. So just a little tidbit. But he's got all those things. What he says is, in order to truly lead, and he works with CEOs of major Fortune 500 companies. What he says, in order to lead, you have to lead with what's called emotional courage. So what is emotional courage? It means the ability to feel, and it's the driving force between anything we accomplish. So literally, how do you lead and how do you write your sermons and everything is to lead with feeling. Now, I'm sure some of you guys are already in your head being like, I'm not going to dump my feelings out in front of my congregation. It's social suicide. It's professional suicide. I'll never get another contract negotiation. That's not what I'm saying. Let's first understand what he's saying, and then we'll understand how it applies in our lives. Let me give you an example. Think of something that you are postponing or paralyzed or just have not followed through with. Don't worry, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. Go. So think of something in your head that you just not, and it can be as simple as a difficult conversation. It could be a sermon you have yet to write, a book you have to read, but usually it's stuff interpersonally with people that are close to you, or congregants, just as an example. Think of what it is that you're afraid to feel. Right? Because when we are postponing or procrastinating, we are afraid of feeling something. So if it's a difficult conversation, is it that I'm afraid to feel hurt? Is it that I'm afraid to feel disappointed? Is it that I don't want to be confrontational? What is that you are afraid to feel? Because that is emotional courage. We think courage is jumping in front of a train, but the likelihood that you're going to jump in front of a train and save a small child in the course of your lifetime is very, very, very slim. But the likelihood that you're going to have to display emotional courage as a rabbi every single day, 3 or more times a day, is very, very high. What I say to my children every day is courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Right? I don't want to do this because I'm afraid to talk to you about it, but that's what courage is. And to be able to identify what is that emotional courage that I need in order to be in front of my congregation on those 3 days, that I feel both vulnerable and powerful, is the key. Okay? So, let me tell you one thing that is, I'm looking at the I know some of you are saying, I'm not going to just dump out all my feelings of what's going on in my life at my synagogue on the high holidays. And by the way, please don't. Please don't. Then you'll be calling me and you'll be like, I just lost my job. Do you have a job for me? And I'm going to say, no, AJU is in transition. We're trying to figure out what we're doing. You'll have to call me back in a year. So the truth of the matter is, please don't that. But what I do think is there is some compromise. There is some way to have emotional courage and to lead in a way that's very different than what we've been taught. And the reason I know it's even more true today than it was 25 years ago is recently, many of you may know her, I know Michelle knows her, Lori Gottlieb wrote a new book, and it's called, if you haven't read it, so maybe you should talk to someone. She's a psychotherapist, she's in our LA community. It's been on the bestseller list since April. And what is the premise of this book, as this therapist, is her best experience, as she says, my most significant credential is that I'm a card-carrying member of the human race. I know what it's like to be a person. And the premise of the book is simply this. Your therapist is not there to be a wall. Your therapist is there to share in the experience of being human with you. And when you share in that experience, she grows and you grow. And I would translate that as a rabbi. We're not therapists. I don't play one on TV. If someone comes to you more than 3 times, I learned from, Rabbi Dorf 25 years ago, send them to therapy, like we all learned it. But there's something to be said is your greatest experiencing is that you're a card-carrying human being. And when you're having cancer and you get up there and for 3 days don't even allude to it, it is the white elephant in the room. And I've watched, because I've been a congregant for the last 15 years, I've watched rabbis do this over and over again and literally sat for 3 days and thought to myself, is this ever going to come up? Because we're all thinking it. Because even though they don't want to see you as a human, you are. And so the first thing that happens that Peter Bregman talks about is that we need to lead with emotional courage. So, how do you do it? First, you have to know what your emotional courage is lacking and what you need. What is it that you're afraid of? And when you can identify that, and I also brought worksheets, we're not going to do them today, but I actually am going to give it to you for you to do home. Now, here's the key. Feeling your emotions and expressing your emotions are very, very different, right? If you express everything you feel, you are a dish rag at work. But knowing when and where and with whom to express and what intentionally you want to express, and we're going to talk about how to execute that, is really key. Third point, overcoming your emotions is very different than becoming them. There's something in between. So becoming them is literally sitting there at a funeral weeping over the loss, so much so that people are like, I think I need to go comfort the rabbi. Overcoming them is sitting there bearing a child with a stale face and being totally just distanced from it. There's something in between. And it's really hard to capture. And I feel like I'm 25 years in and I'm working at this every single day. But when I'm not deeply connected to that moment, what I do know is I'm failing them and I'm failing me. Fourth thing is communicate clearly about what you want to express. Now, I see this a lot with rabbis, especially as being a congregant, I see it with myself. We got 40 minutes, you want to express 1,500 things, and the truth is, imagine they're going to be with you for 120 years. So communicate one thing to them each year. As Rebecca knows, we started the group at Sinai, and I said to them, you're going to pick one halacha to observe Shabbat or in your life, and we're going to do one a year for 120 years. And recently someone just came up to me and they said, we're on our 25th mitzvot, right? 1 year, one message, one thing, right? And think of it as a long game, not as the short game. So, Peter Bregman talks about 3 pillars of emotional courage, and I want to discuss them today so you really understand what it looks like in realia. Because what I always say to rabbis, when someone says to me after a sermon, that was a really great talk, that was a really good sermon, I literally want to shoot myself. I'm like, ugh! The minute I hear that, I just think to myself, great, you can go online, and for 12 minutes you can hear a TED Talk, and it's 1,000 times better than mine. So you didn't need to come to shul for that. If someone says to me, hey, Rabbi Hirsch, I just want to let you know that when you talked about doing X, Y, or Z, and I went home and I did that, and it transformed the way I behave and the way I believe as a Jew, and it led me to take action, I feel a sense of like, oh, I'm back in God's work. So I spend a lot of time not trying to perfect the perfect sermon or talk, but what's actually going to leave the person walking away doing something differently. So let's talk about it. So the 3 pillars, according to Peter Brigham. First one, if you have it written there so you don't have to worry. We need to feel confident and grounded. Now, I love that Peter Brigham says that. People spend a lifetime trying to build confidence. Confidence is really, he's like, I've heard him speak, and he's like, just feel confident. It's like, really? Because, I mean, I spent a lot of years in therapy to get there. Just to self-esteem, forget confidence. Just to feel confident and grounded is a hard thing, especially at the high holidays. Because that is when we feel the most judged for our professional life. And so how do we do it? So first is criticism and feedback. I use this mantra almost every day of my life. Other people's opinions of me are none of my business. Now, that's not true because the board, it is their business, right? But that being said, I live with the ideal that other people's opinions of me are not my business, then I can actually get grounded in this moment. The second is the comparison model. Rabbi down the street is giving this sermon, Rabbi on that street is giving that sermon, she's always so great, he's always so much better, he's the charismatic leader, he's the cultic leader. Just shut down the noise. Just shut it down. There's always someone better and there's always someone worse. Really, there is. And our son, for those of you that know, my son Emmett, which means truth, I always have to say that, but funny, this room knows that. He's an incredible mathematician. I don't say that just because I'm a Jewish mother. It's that actually that's what he is. But with that comes a lot of deficits. But you know what he always says to us whenever someone compliments him on his mathematics and his giftedness? Oh, there's so many people smarter than me, and then he starts listing them off. I mean, what a sad statement. How about, yes, thank you. Stop it. There's always going to be better rabbis than you. There's always going to be worse rabbis than you. I'm not even sure what better and worse are. If you're a rabbi that touches the soul of another human being once a year, and God forbid, at some point in your life, another young person wants to be a rabbi because you modeled it, job well done. Right? That's it. Stop trying to impress. I spend a lot of time when I'm thinking about impressing and thinking about what you're all thinking, I suck. When I think about what God's thinking, I do much better. Fourth, believe in yourself. This one's really hard because when congregants are saying to you all year, you didn't do this, you didn't meet my needs, all the different things that congregants do, it's hard to actually believe you have something in you or give it. So we're going to get to how you get to this confidence. Then this is also from my book, my first or second book, I don't know. I'm in the midst of a third one, so forgive me. Be a B+. I talk a lot about being a B+. Be a B+ mom, be a B+ grandmother, be a B+ rabbi. You know, I was always a B+ student, and I couldn't really catch that A and always felt less than. But let me tell you, 88% is really, really good. It really is. And if you have an 88% career every year, and 88% of your work is what you do during the holidays, guess what? You've set yourself up for success this year. And then stop assessing the sermon and spend more time assessing yourself. Rabbis all the time send me their sermons to revise. And what I end up doing is spending more time talking to them about where they're at in their emotional life so that they can actually speak their truth on the paper. I spend less time editing all those words and more time, what's really going on? What's the thing you don't want to talk about? What's the thing that would actually have people connect deeply with you and look at you like you are a fellow human being trying to figure this out? You are just a rabbi transmitting Jewish knowledge. So how do you do that? How do you feel confident? First, you need to feel connected. I cannot tell you that most of us feel tremendously lonely. And I'm not talking about rabbis, I'm talking about humanity. The epidemic of loneliness is greater than it's ever been in the world, and we can be surrounded by relationships, people, but the amount of loneliness is staggering. 1 in 12 kids will try to commit suicide this year, between the ages of 18 and 24. That's the statistics. So the amount of loneliness, depression, anxiety has skyrocketed. I can give you a million reasons why. I spent a year, 2 years at Hillel addressing the situation for this. So first of all, find yourself a couple of people that make you feel truly strong and independent. And I know this is hard, but there's a book called The Accidental Tourist. If you've read it, it was 25 years ago. They made a movie out of it. I'm not giving away the ending, but I am. So if you haven't seen it, just know you know the ending. The end of The Accidental Tourist, he goes with the unexpected relationship. And he says it's not the person you're with, it's how you feel about yourself when you're with that person. Find yourself some people that make you feel incredibly good about yourself. Don't surround yourself and give your practice sermon to the people that rip your sermons apart. Give it to the people that are like, it's really good, here's where I make some tweaks. Give it to the people that actually give you strength. And if you don't have one of those people, then let me tell you, find one in this room. Because rabbis, if there's anything they understand, this job is weird. I think you have to be a little weird to become a rabbi. I include myself completely in that category. And the fact of the matter is, it's a lonely job at many points. So find yourself another person who truly understands what it means to be in the club. Focus on those receiving the message, not on giving the message. I see this problem a lot when I read Rabbi's sermon. They're focused on what they're saying. I want people to focus on what they're hearing. If you remember in football, and I'm not a huge football thing, although Emmett was named the week that Emmitt Smith broke the passing record for any football fans. Emmett went, the rushing record, there, you can tell. Right? That the key in football, according to my limited knowledge, but what I understand, is that it's not the throw, although Tom Brady would actually disagree with me, but it's the catch. I hear rabbis focus so much on their words and what they're saying. Focus on the catch. Focus on the receiving end. What are they hearing? Because what you're saying and what they're hearing can be very different. And what you want is for them to hear what you're really saying. So if they're looking at you and you're suffering from cancer and you're not saying anything about it, what they're hearing is, my rabbi is totally suffering, but she's talking about cheeseburgers and why we shouldn't be eating them. Right? Think about what they're hearing. Practice taking risk in which perceived risk is much higher than actual risk. So find yourself a group of people. I did this at Sinai every year, a group of congregants, and I put them together in front of me, and I gave them my sermons again and again, because the perceived risk was high because they're congregants, but they weren't board members, and the other thing is they had real expertise in helping me figure out how to make them better. Send 5 letters every Friday for no reason for the month of Elul. Every Friday of my adult life, I send 5 letters for no reason, whether it's to someone that has had a loss, or someone that did something good for me during the week, or something that impressed me. Even a stranger. I sent a letter to Howard Schultz, the head of Starbucks, and he wrote me back. That's how we started a friendship. The truth is 5 letters every week is letting the world know that you matter, and even more so that they matter. That will improve your sermons. Sometimes the direct link to success is not linear. 5 letters for the month of Elul. If you can't do 5, do 3. It doesn't have to be a long letter. Obviously, know you are trustworthy and that you listen and you care. So then the third pillar, I've got about 3 minutes to say this, is less about pleasing and what people are going to say, more about God as your employer. You know, in my house, we've had the same people that work with us, helping us with our children for the last 20 years. And when people say to Sonia and Donna, oh, is Sherre your boss? They know, oh, sorry, God is our boss. And I know it sounds like, oh, really? Do they really say that? Actually, they do. We're not here to serve other people just as much as they're not here to serve us. We're here to serve God. And you went into this job, and I know this because I meet a lot of you, and I talk to a lot of you, is because we really do believe there's a greater purpose to this. And so spend less time on what's going to impress them and make them think you're a great rabbi, and spend more time on what God is going to be impressed with. And then communicate clearly. So before I conclude, I want to say a couple of things. I brought a handout. Sorry. It's a little worksheet. One, is that I have everything online and I can send you the link so that you don't have to have any of this on paper. I apologize for not having it all in the packet before. I just didn't have a chance. But I want to say a couple things to conclude. One is I don't want to be preachy by any stretch of the imagination. I am truly trying to figure this out each day as I go along. But one of the only sermons that I remember that I've given, and I've given a lot of them, was in my early years. Rebecca was there. The first day of Rosh Hashanah, there was a ton of noise. And I literally kept shushing people and criticizing them and telling them there's a new rabbi, I was stupid, I didn't realize that my holidays are going to be really noisy. And I kept shushing them and everything. And during the days in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I got feedback. And it was not good. Right? It's like, this is the high holidays, we can come and do as we want, this is Sinai Temple, the whole thing. And so the night before Kol Nidre, I was up all night. I had written my sermon out. And I was all set to give it, but I could not sleep. And that night at Kol Nidre, I took my sermon, and I said to everybody, if it wasn't Kol Nidre, I'd rip it in half. And I set it down. And I asked everybody for forgiveness for the way that I behaved at Rosh Hashanah. Because I was young, because I didn't know better, I didn't give a bunch of excuses, I just asked for slicha, which was the whole point of the thing. And everybody in the congregation was silent, which was so funny, because the first day nobody was quiet, and now they're all as quiet as can be. Turns out they can be quiet. But I asked for forgiveness because that's what I actually needed to do in that real moment. I stopped trying to be who they expected me to be, and I started to be myself. And it was a pivotal change in how I went on to become a rabbi in my career and how I continue to be. So whoever you are, wherever you're at in this moment, grab it, embrace it. You know, don't sit there and think, oh my God, I've got to give this sermon that I've written. But in that moment, grab it because it is so worthwhile. After my father died, I started by saying, when my father died, I didn't talk about it at the holidays. Then this happened, and after that, I started talking about it a lot. I stopped believing in God, and I was sure that in my first year of being a rabbi, I was going to be fired, and I should just go pack up my boxes in my office and walk out the door. And that was the moment that people started knocking on my door, because before that, they weren't. Before they were, oh, another rabbi's at the Sinai Temple. But the minute I actually said, I've stopped believing in God, I buried my father in 6 months, I have to do this in front of you, and I hate doing it in front of you, I hate not looking perfect in front of you, I'm supposed to be the rabbi. The minute I embraced the moment I was in, I started becoming the rabbi. So my prayer and wish for each of you is that whatever emotional courage you need this year, seize it. Let it guide you. Let it be what you need most, because I promise you that the results will be far greater than anything you've written to impress someone or to sound lofty or to sound rabbinic. Grounded in text, teach you. Because when you do, I have no doubt you will exhibit emotional courage, and God will know exactly why you were meant to do this job. It's my prayer for each and every one of you. I hope that you'll come up and greet yourselves, and I hope that if you do have questions or along the preparation process, everybody reaches out to me. Not everybody, but if you would like to, I'd be happy to. It's really my joy and my privilege